Hi everyone, I'm here to discuss case number 3. The first question is to summarize the case. The case study examines the 4 approaches to theories of development, stages of growth, structural patterns of development, dependency, and neoclassical, and uses them to help provide insight about a country's development process. In this situation, the 2 countries are compared using their development history to offer parallels that confirm how their actions follow a specific theory, as well as in some cases to challenge the theory. It compares Korea and Argentina. They are similar in population with 41 million and 50 million respectively, and were long classified as middle-income countries. However, recently South Korea has been redesignated by the World Bank as a high-income country with a PPP of 31,000 in 2008, where Argentina in 2011 sits at 17,000 PPP. Just 30 years earlier, the reverse was true, and this case goes on to try to explain why this has occurred. Although this case study does make reference to all the models for each country, we will focus on discussing the theories that are the most compatible to get a deeper understanding of the country's activities and the correlation to the expected result within the model. Korea poses serious challenges to both the dependency model and neoclassical counter-revolutionary models. Their development more closely follows the structural patterns or stages of growth model. Korea's progression demonstrates how they are able to make changes that are necessary, a shift from agricultural to industrial, and with a focus on not just investment, but with also savings needed for sustainable growth. Additionally, a drive to mastering technology and supporting human capital, especially in the field of education and skills training, has allowed the country to rapidly develop to the level that it enjoys today. In Argentina's case, they have little in their economic history that correlates with the stages and patterns theory, but dependency revolution and neoclassical counter-revolution theories do offer important insight into their development. Argentina demonstrates how a country who started off strong, Roswell considered Argentina and Mexico as the only 2 countries in Latin America who would achieve takeoff by the 1960s when his book was out, to who have now fallen into a cycle that keeps them from furthering their development. It's an example of how government policy consistently seems to support privileged interests rather than the needs of the country, resulting in inefficient state enterprise, restrictions, and unnecessary red tape that inhibits industry and entrepreneurs from moving forward. Question 2. In which ways does Korea confirm the linear stages of growth model, and which ways does it contest it? In the case of Korea, they follow the model very clearly. Their traditional society where rural workers shifted to city workers, which began the country's shift from agricultural to manufacturing, and the development of urbanized areas, which was noted by Ristow in the early 60s. The preconditions for takeoff, where the country must increase foreign savings, which Korea did by utilizing aid from Japan and the US. They began to use technology to increase productivity in both agricultural and industrial to help increase domestic savings. This is also where entrepreneurship began emerging. The takeoff happens through the investment in national income. Korea is some of the highest in the world, and the country was able to rapidly ascend through this stage because of it. Since the original assessment, the country became focused on investment, as noted with the GNI at 15% in 1965, growing to 37% in 1990, and staying close to 40% from 2000 to 2007. The amount has lessened now with Korea having moved on to the next stage. The drive to maturity. They reach maturity through the mastering of the range of current available technologies and through the new imports and exports that have become integrated with the global community, and it has allowed them to move on to the next stage. The age of mass consumption. According to Ristow's theory, this is where they are now entering. This can be seen in the world demand of many highly desirable items manufactured by Samsung, Hyundai, LG, and Kia Motors, and further with foreign countries' desire to do business with and invest in Korean companies. Korea contradicts the model, which implies for development it requires an open market, but this is not the case in Korea. Even though the heavy involvement of government is contradictory to the model, it has proven to be beneficial in creating a strong culture and a sense of pride within the nation. This can be noted as even during the Asian financial crisis of 97-98, where the economy was still able to grow at 5.8%. Korea supports a state-sponsored monopoly and the privatization of public corporations. An example is how manufacturers in Korea have the luxury of being one of the only providers, allowing them to source raw materials and labor they need at a low cost. This can be seen in the manufacturing industry with cars and technological devices, where low competition within the country and a limited number of imports has protected these companies, allowing them to use the capital to reinvest to now be a strong country. Question 3 is, how does the neoclassical dependency theory match the development of Argentina? The dependency theory is that a small developing country will have a surplus of resources and cheap labor available, and that developing countries will exploit this, purchasing the raw goods at a low cost, which will then be manufactured and resold to the developing countries at a higher price. This forces developing countries to use the capital that they could use to invest to improve their own capacity to instead having to use it to purchase the items that they need, which creates a dependency cycle that continues to divide the rich from the poor nations. Argentina's development closely follows this theory. Originally opening the export market is what helped Argentina grow, with sales to countries and multinational corporations, especially the British and Americans, who purchased and exported a large extent of raw goods to help the country create that initial income. However, it later resulted in a drain on capital, with the country having to spend too much of its revenue to import what it needed. This has led to them being unable to have enough residual capital to utilize in the investment of their own infrastructure and ability to invest in human capital or further develop or support the manufacturing industry. This lack of investment capital has caused them to have to adhere to business restrictions that affect their operations, resulting in manufacturing export industry having to agree to constraints that further impeded growth and stability of the industry and really of the country itself. This included selling state industries to foreign companies. This deficit also led to Argentina defaulting on its debt in 2002 and resulted in the economy shrinking by 11%. Argentina also suits this model when looking at certain groups, including military, entrepreneurs, public officials, trade unions, and leaders, which represent a small elite group who enjoy high income, high status, and political power, and who are often inhibiting change, which does keep the country perpetually in a cycle of underdevelopment, and it does create political uncertainty as well. The last question. In your opinion, is there a single theory that applies to either or both of these countries, and why or why not? Through the case, it points out a single theory does not apply to either or both of the countries, but has elements of all four approaches. I think when a country is developing, it is difficult to classify them in a specific theory. While transitioning, the development may seem to complement one particular theory, but as time goes on, it may contain elements that contradict it, making it difficult to classify. In this case, it seems that there is more of a blending of elements of two theories used to best classify the country's current state of development and to try to provide insight as to where they are headed. As this case study notes, even though a country may have similarities with the theory, it does not necessarily equate to a country following exactly what the theory outlines. I agree with this idea of reviewing development through all the approaches to help better understand the complete process surrounding a country's development.